Good morning. We are back at ICDRI 2022, bright and early this morning to convene and continue this discussion on the resilience of infrastructure in SIDS and LDCs. This morning, we start the day 2 of the conference with the third of the 3 regional forums. I'm delighted and honored to introduce our moderator for this morning, Mr. Tim Gill, the Deputy High Commissioner to the Kiribati of the Australian High Commission. Mr. Gill has been associated with the Australian government's aid program for 15 years as a senior specialist in agriculture and food security, as the director of infrastructure, as the director of the climate integration unit, and the first secretary of Fiji. Good afternoon, Tim, and I hand over to you to start this session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Just testing you can hear me okay?
Yes, Tim.
Yes, let's hope so. So hello and Maori, which is the word for hello here in Kiribati. And welcome to this regional forum for the International Conference on Disaster Resilient Infrastructure for 2022. Enabling resilient, sustainable and inclusive infrastructure transitions in small island developing states and least developed countries. I'm coming to you from the atoll nation of Kiribati in the equatorial Pacific Ocean. I'm leading Australian government's aid program here in Kiribati. As my introduction said, I've been involved in climate resilience and infrastructure in the aid program for the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade for quite some time. So I had the pleasure of working closely with the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, or CDRI, in recent years. So I'm happy to be able to facilitate this forum. In addition to Australia's long-term support for Kiribati development in education, health, food security, sustainable economic growth, and many other areas, we have a number of infrastructure projects here as well, in the capital here in South Tarawa, and also on the outer islands, which can be many thousands of kilometres away from the capital. Building resilient infrastructure here is indeed challenging. Everyone on this call would have experienced the supply chain disruptions brought on by COVID, but imagine how much these amplify when you're trying to get a ship to bring building supplies out to these remote islands. And of course, travel restrictions make it very hard to bring in skilled engineers as well. But the even bigger challenges are those that we're here today to discuss. In the face of intensifying disasters brought about by climate change, how can we make the transition to a more resilient way of securing our energy, water, food, economic, education, communication, and health needs into the future? Kiribati is lucky to not be threatened by tropical cyclones, the way much of the Pacific is, but with the maximum height of its 32 atolls being just 3 meters above sea level, in the middle of a vast ocean, with just coral reefs to protect us from the immense power of the ocean, it doesn't take much for a very high tide or storm surge to flood the narrow strip of land with salt water, which can really test the structural integrity of buildings and the fragile freshwater lens that communities rely upon. I hardly have to tell this audience that with climate change, the threats from sea level rise, heat stress on coral barrier reefs, and increasing storm surges will intensify the challenges of delivering basic services and economic livelihoods in a place where everyone is on the coast. So this event is very timely because we need new ways of doing infrastructure with implications for transitioning all of our systems of development. I want to thank the CDRI, of which Australia is a proud member, for organising this very important event and inviting me to facilitate it. It's indeed a pleasure to be able to present to you an amazing group of speakers today. The first 3 will present you the challenges faced in small island and low-income countries in different parts of the world, the Caribbean, the Indian Ocean, and the Pacific. We need to really understand firsthand the problems the most vulnerable and under-resourced countries are facing. But we won't leave it there, as well as the solutions promoted by our developing country representatives themselves. We will also hear from experts who are offering transition solutions in the form of improved financial systems, technology, and capacity building. Thank you for joining this session. You can post your questions in the Q&A section of this Zoom meeting, and we'll do our best to address them at the end of this session. I'll introduce the second panel later, but let's start with the voices from the ground first. So we have three voices, and the first will be Miss Luisa Tuefito Malolo. She's from Tonga. She's the director of the Department of Climate Change, Ministry of Meteorology, Energy, Information, Disaster Management, Environment, Climate Change, and Communications for the Kingdom of Tonga's government. Now, the list of all of those responsibilities should show to you how important it is to have experts who can cover a wide range of responsibilities and how amazing it is that countries with relatively small populations can cover this huge breadth of expertise. So it's wonderful to have Miss Luisa here with us. We'll also have Miss Alejandrina Sosa Barante, who is a consultant for strategic communication with the Dominican Port Authority in the Dominican Republic. And Alejandrina will join us from Colombia today, where she happens to be today. So thank you for joining us. Our third expert will be Lieutenant Colonel Fali, Aliciana Fabian, who is the General Project Coordinator at the Bureau National de Gestion des Risques et des Catastrophes in Madagascar. That's the National Office for Risk and Disaster Management in Madagascar. So let's begin with these voices from the ground. So let me tell you a little bit more about Miss Luisa Tuefito Malolo. She has been coordinating climate change programs, projects, and activities in Tonga for over 20 years. One of the milestones of her career has been that she coordinated the development of the Tonga Joint National Action Plan on Climate Change and Disaster Risk Management, which is a real achievement. And in 2011, she was contracted as the team leader for that Joint National Action Plan Secretariat. She has had a storied career working on climate change for the Tongan government ever since that time. And she has led the climate change team with the development of the Tonga Climate Change Fund Bill, which was enacted just last year in Tonga in 2021. So I really look forward to hearing what Miss Luisa has to tell us about Tonga. I think she's going to tell us about coastal erosion and inundation, adaptation measures, and even the challenges faced in telecommunications infrastructure in the light of the recent volcanic eruption that you may have heard about and the subsequent tsunami that really did challenge all of the infrastructure and resilience of Tonga. But they've come through that challenge, or they're still coming through it. And I'd just love to hear anything that you have to tell us, Ms. Luisa, about your experience, your long experience on building resilience in Tonga. Over to you.
Malolele, and good afternoon from Tonga. It's around 3 p.m. Tonga time. Well, thank you very much for that introduction. As you're well aware of, that Tonga is one of the small island developing states, which is extremely vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and also disaster risks. In accordance with its geographical size, Tonga is very small, and that shows its vulnerability to climate change impacts and disaster risks. Geologically, Tonga is located at the subduction zone of the Indian, Australian, and the Pacific tectonic plates. And it's also Tonga is also located within the Ring of Fire, where intense seismic activities occur. And about 200 kilometers to the west of the Tonga Trench, it is a potential source of tsunami. So you can see how Tonga is extremely vulnerable to climate change impacts and disaster risks due to its geographical location, size, and also its geological composition, and also other related aspects. And most of the coastal communities in Tonga, especially on the main islands of Tongatapu, have by the coastal communities, about 80% of critical infrastructures in the coastal areas are extremely vulnerable due to its low, to the location in the low topographic elevation, meaning the average altitude of those location of those infrastructures are about between 2 to 5 meters above the mean sea level. So it describes it's highly vulnerable to storm surges and tsunami. So these the coastal communities in Tonga, they have experienced historic erosion and also historic inundation. So due to sea level rise, these coastal communities has experienced erosion, and due to high tide, especially King's tide, these coastal areas are usually inundated. So we have done a lot of assessment of the impacts of climate change on coastal communities. Assessment, I'm referring to conducting vulnerability and adaptation assessments on different sectors, vulnerable sectors in Tonga that also included the coastal sector. So the critical infrastructures that are located on the coastline, I'm referring to the residential households, buildings, government buildings, offices, tourist resorts, that includes hotels, because of their location on these on the low topographic elevation of these coastal areas, they are highly vulnerable to the impacts of sea level rise, storm surges, and tsunami, like that what we have experienced in January of this year. So based on those assessment, vulnerability and adaptation assessment, from those findings and from those assessment reports, we then managed to formulate policies, climate change policies, plans, to where we set actions, priority actions on mitigation, adaptations, and other cross-cutting actions such as capacity building, including awareness program, data collections, and mainstreaming activities, coordination activities, and so forth, as well as financing and also technology need assessment. So we have those documents in place, and last year we have managed to also get our Tonga Climate Change Fund bill enacted by Parliament in 2021, November 2021. So, so we have those assessments done. We have the policies. We have the plans where we set our targets and identify our priority climate actions. We have those documents, but we still face challenges. Challenges include financing, technology, capacity building, and of course, monitoring, evaluation, reporting, and learning. So those are the challenges that we have faced. How we manage those challenges to date with regards to financing, we have managed to establish a Tonga Climate Change Trust Fund. Tongan government has envisaged the establishment of that climate financing mechanism as a sustainable financing mechanism for Tonga, where we pool all the climate and related resources into that fund. And we have also believed that that's a fast way or fast mechanism to access climate financing. We have witnessed and we have experienced the challenge of getting a proposal developed and submitted to the donors. It is a lengthy process to get the project proposal endorsed. So that's one of the reasons why we had this climate change trust fund established, so that we can fastly access funding to build our resilience to climate change and disaster risk in the country. One of the actions that we have we have implemented to overcome that challenge, we have also managed to secure funding from the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub to have a climate finance advisor to help us to fast track the development of project concept notes and proposals, and to get it submitted, and also increase our accessibility to climate financing, such as Green Climate Fund, GEF, and other sources of climate funds. So having that climate finance advisors, so up to this stage, we have managed to get 2 climate finance advisors from the Commonwealth Finance Access Hub. So Tonga is indeed grateful for that continuous support from the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub, which increases Tonga's accessibility to climate financing. And they also help us in securing funds to contribute to our existing climate change trust fund. However, there's still a need to strengthen our capacity in accessing climate financing. Challenges with technology. We have done some technology need assessment in relation to identifying technologies to mitigate or to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. But we are mindful of our greenhouse gas emission. Greenhouse gas emission is negligible in comparison to the bigger polluters or to the next one countries. But I believe that I think I'm on the same boat with the other small island states. Regardless of our emissions, it's very, very small in comparison to the other bigger countries, the big polluters. But it doesn't stop us, the small island countries, to relax or implement no actions, because we are at the forefront of receiving the negative or the adverse impacts of climate change and disaster risk. So that's why we have to formulate these policies, have this action plan developed, secure funding, because we are the most vulnerable countries to the impacts of climate change. So technology is still a challenge for us. But the climate finance advices that we have secured from the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub and also the Rocky Mountain Institute. Those advices will, of course, help us to, to secure resources to conduct a thorough assessment for Tonga on the most feasible technologies for mitigation and adaptation measures for Tonga. With regards to the challenges,
Thank you, Director Lisa. Sorry, can I just cut you off there? I'm sorry, Director, but we're going to have to move to the next speaker, if that's okay.
Right.
We will have opportunity for questions a little later, but I think we've really got a nice flavor of the complexity, I guess, of the challenges, all of those different kinds of disasters that can impact on Tonga: earthquake, tsunami, storm surge, cyclones, and so many businesses, people, and institutions right on the coast where that erosion can occur. And we also got a flavor of the way that you're responding to those complex challenges through building and complementing your own capacity and trying to really find a way to gather together those climate finance opportunities and make the most of them for your country. I really appreciate the complexity of the challenge that you're facing and the way that you're responding to it. So hopefully we'll have a chance to come back to that a little later on. But I'll have to jump, if that's okay, to our next speaker, which is Ms. Alejandrina Sosa Marante, who is a consultant for strategic communication with the Dominican Port Republic. She comes originally from Venezuela, so she's a complicated Latin lady here. Comes from Venezuela. She moved to Germany, where she did some communications work, and then eventually settled in the Dominican Republic, working on communications, political campaigns, and other work. And now with the Dominican Port Authority, where she's contributing to institutional relations and enhancement of sustainability and strengthening the social infrastructure as well as the physical infrastructure. She's an institutional focal point for APODOM with the National Council for Climate Change of the Dominican Republic. And she'll be able to tell us a little bit about how that institution is positioning itself to face the challenges that face Dominican Republic. So the floor is yours, Alejandrina, and if you don't mind just giving us a little flavor for what are those climate and disaster challenges faced by Dominican Republic and how the Port Authority is responding. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, thank you, Tim, for your kind words, and it's a pleasure for me to share this panel with Mrs. Sofia Tumalolo and Lieutenant Colonel Aliciana Fabian. I would like to thank as well to His Excellency David Puig, Ambassador from the Dominican Republic in India, for the invitation to participate at this international conference on disaster resilient infrastructure. I have so much to say, but now I feel the pressure to just give you a bite so we can start the talk. So let's try to go there, no? The Dominican Republic, due being an island and its geographical position in the center of the Caribbean, has a privileged situation for the development of an optimal system, port system. But as well, we have, because being an island, we are vulnerable to catastrophic phenomena of hydrometeorological origin, such as storms, cyclones, as we spoke earlier, floods, droughts, and many others. Climate change risk management constitutes a preponderant component for our new development projects, as well as for the renovation of existing infrastructure in our port system. We can probably affirm that APODOM, Dominican Port Authority, is in the process of identifying mitigation initiatives to reduce greenhouse gases aligned with the updated national determined contribution for 2020-2030 of the Dominican Republic, which sets a 27% reduction of such emissions and welcomes opportunity to share such experiences and know-how with other members of the coalition. At APODOM, we have assumed transformation of the port, which includes the transformation of the existing infrastructure into a more sustainable one. One of our objectives is to achieve a resilient, sustainable infrastructure adapted to climate change, to support economic and social development with an emphasis on affordable and equitable access for all. But we know that this constitutes a persistent challenge. Although we classify our ports, the Dominican ports, in public, private, and concessions by contract, according to operations, we have loading ports, fishing practice docks, and cruise terminals. Most of our cruise terminals are licensed with international companies and have sought innovation, among other things, in environmental issues. Beyond the obligation to submit environmental impact studies, which our country requires by law, we have technicians who are constantly monitoring the base where these cruise ports are. We had an eventuality, as I talked to you earlier, some weeks ago, I believe 2 months ago or something like that, with the departure of an Oasis-type cruise ship. It's one of the biggest cruise ships in the world, which ran aground when leaving the Dominican Republic. The environmental and expert studies were able to determine that it was not a dredging problem, that it was the first suspect we had, that it was the dredging and the conditions. But at the end, we could determine that it wasn't a human error from the captain or our pilots, nor the dredging. It was something with a change of winds at the time of the ship's departure. So we found out at that point that even when we've been worried by the dredging and the sea level and everything, the wind sometimes it's something we have to pay more attention to. And since that moment, we've been working on finding solutions or alternatives and other ways to dredge in another direction to prevent it from happening again, for example. With the loading ports, I would like to highlight the port of Manzanillo at the north of the country, that since the President Luis Abinader assumed the leadership of the government, proposed a renovation for Manzanillo. Today, we have what we call the rehabilitation and expansion of the port of Manzanillo, that after some feasibility studies in conjunction with the Inter-American Development Bank is now in tender. And this project itself contemplates achieving results within 4 specific pillars. One of them being specifically to ensure the resilience of investment to climate change and the care of protected areas. It's the first loading port that this administration is working on, and for the administration of President Luis Abinader and the government, and for us in Dominican Port Authority, for us it's been really important to get this in the project itself, no? to make the infrastructure resilient, because the ports we've received when we got here not necessarily went through all that process, okay? And the third, as I told you already, we have some fishing docks. Personally, this is my favorite project at Puerto, since I believe, as you explained earlier, that I've made social work my whole life with communications. I believe that is not just about working for the large ships and import and export and cruises, tourism. We have to work for the lower income sectors as well, and the people itself, our people itself. So we designed what we call the plan for construction and renovation of fishing docks, which we seek to impact more than 75,000 formally registered fishermen and around 500,000 people indirectly, by providing docks designed for fisher activities where their boats will not suffer the damage they have experienced for years by, for example, tidal force. Unfortunately, the absence of environment and climate change education in the Dominican Republic in general, and in small-scale fisheries in particular, is alarming. This, along with the non-existence or non-compliance of regulations to protect ecosystems and coastal environment by restricting or prohibiting the use of LF carbureted 2-stroke engines in boats and small navels, has been a discussion for years. Most, if not all, of the boats of these 75,000 fishermen are of this type, which emit up of 30% fuel and burn oil directly into the water and air. The above-mentioned dramatic situation has oriented discussions with the Climate Change Council aimed to design an interinstitutional pilot project for the substitution of these highly contaminated engines with electric non-emission off-road motors. Once again, on behalf of the Dominican Republic and Apordom itself, I would like to express our institutional gratitude for the kind invitation to participate in this excellent panel and look forward to future collaboration opportunities with the coalition and its members. I know that the coalition will be a strategic ally to assist us in the design and identification of financing mechanisms for new initiatives aimed to promote the resilience of infrastructures against climate risks and disasters, which will lead us to continue placing the Dominican ports with pride facing the sea. Thank you.
Gracias, Alejandrina. That's a fantastic overview of a really wide range of challenges facing one port authority across the cruise sector, the loading ports, as well as the fishing sector. And thanks also for covering those challenges that come from both the mitigation as well as the adaptation and the new innovations that you're introducing to try to make it safer for ship owners and employees to challenge those new things like the changing wind directions and more extreme disasters, but also trying to address the greenhouse gas emissions, which we know are quite high from the shipping sector. So thank you so much for that flavor of life in the Dominican Republic. So with that, I might, given we're very short on time, I'll just please, if you don't mind, I'll introduce Lieutenant Colonel Fali Aliciana Fabian and ask him to speak to us briefly about his experiences from Madagascar. He is working in the National Office for Risk and Disaster Management, and he's built a solid professional experience in both disaster and risk management, with deep experience in critical infrastructure, including energy, electricity generation, road networks and transport, as well as telecommunications and radio communications, and also been very personally involved in disaster relief operations and those very complex post-disaster needs assessments that take a lot of skill and intellectual capacity. So we really appreciate you giving us your time today, Lieutenant Colonel Fali. And if we could ask you to make a presentation on the case of making resilient energy transitions in rapidly urbanizing Madagascar. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor, and thank you for inviting us as a panelist. As you know, developing countries are particularly vulnerable to the impact of weather-related natural disaster due to global climate change. People in the small island developing states like Madagascar have very high dependence on natural resources. Most of those countries don't have access to the kind of capabilities and resources that might help not only to prevent disaster associated with natural hazard become crisis, but also to cope with them when they do occur. The limited capacity is reflected also in the ability of allocated budget to invest in build resilient infrastructure that can withstand with impact of repeated cycles of acute and chronic climate change. As you know, Madagascar is an island in the country, is an island country located in Indian Ocean. It is one of the Southern African countries most vulnerable to the effect of climate change. Thus, we are very exposed to a variety of weather and climate phenomena. For example, during the last 3 months, Madagascar was hit by 4 major cyclones. They have wide-ranging impact on human health and safety, natural resource availability, economic activity, and infrastructure. For instance, the damage to the electricity and water company, Jirama, on its electricity infrastructure is estimated at more than 20 million US dollars. Several regions is affected, 18 out of 30. The damage concerns, in particular, the distribution and transport infrastructure, poles, cable, transformers. The first reconstruction actions have been undertaken by the company itself with its internal resources, but remain largely insufficient. Support from partners like World Bank with the contingency emergency response component is expected to complete this reconstruction needs. Madagascar is working toward periodically updating and effectively using existing documents that Madagascar has for disaster response, such plan of continuity plan for essential emergency services and national recovery plan with a focus on energy infrastructure. One of the objectives is to be able to better coordinate the responsibility as well as resources of different responsible entities, Ministry of Energies, the Water Electricity Department, the National Disaster Risk Management Office, before, during, and after each disaster. The emphasis is on prevention and warning system. The systemization of damage estimates the speed of intervention to restore the distribution service, better planning, and management resources. In addition, it's important to highlight that Madagascar develops and adopts standards for climate resilient energy infrastructure. In addition to diagnostic of existing infrastructure, production, transport, and distribution are essential to develop a general maintenance and revision plan. It should be accompanied by a sustainable finance plan. Most of such diagnostic is being prepared with the help of specialists of international institutions like World Bank. Given to the vulnerability of Madagascar, significance of casualties and other economic losses cannot be overstated in major cities. Because of poor drainage systems, the transport connectivity in the city is easily disrupted by heavy precipitation. For the city of Antananarivo, the capital of Madagascar, 2/3 of the city population live in vulnerable area. Over 500 kilometers of road, or about 16% of city's total road network, are located in flood-prone areas. During the recent cyclone in early 2022, the 4 cyclone damage of 100 road network points, 50 bridges along the national roads, and over 1,470 meters of railway network, as well as a result of landslides, floods, falling trees, impending critical access to affect town and hampering relief service to repair effort. There is a lack of space dedicated to urban transport infrastructure due to the lack of urban development. With only 5% of urban areas for roads, the norm is 15 to 25%. Urban transport services are currently mostly informal and not organized well. The system needs regulation to ensure services quality and resilience. There are already programs of His Excellency of the President of the Republic of Madagascar, André Gill, related to urban transport, such as Urban Trains Project, Cable Car Project, the highway road projects that links the capital of Madagascar to the economic capital of Madagascar. This program will be reviewed to be more integrated to gain to maximum output for their complementarities. There is also other projects of enhancing the resilience of urban cities like Antananarivo, the capital, Murundav also, with another project funded by the Green Fund. But in any case, Madagascar gives a very good importance to capitalize, first of all, its internal capacity, natural resources, populations, and at the same time, the cooperation with international organization and country friend of Madagascar, which can really help to push the vision of the president to bring Madagascar to be a developed country. In any case,
thank you, Lieutenant Colonel.
Thank you very much for giving us the floor today. If you have any question, we are available for that.
Lieutenant Colonel Fali, thank you so much. A wonderful, snapshot of a complicated situation in Madagascar. I think, I didn't really appreciate how urbanization has impacted so much on the roads network. And obviously, when that roads network is insufficient, overcrowded, and then flood inundated and bridges falling down at the same time as the energy system might be, collapsing due to a natural disaster, how do you then get the resources to where they need to be able to repair that system? So the transport and the energy making that a much more complex disaster than it possibly needs to be. I guess due to that rapid urbanization, and as you say, the lack of finances available to be able to overcome those challenges. So thank you so much for that snapshot of again the complexity that's facing an Indian Ocean nation. We've really heard from across those three oceans now that all of the disaster and climate challenges that are being faced across these three countries and these three oceans lead to immense challenges in terms of capacity that's falling on an under-resourced government system that has to tackle so many different challenges from climates and disasters, trying to address both adaptation and mitigation, and also be able to access the finances necessary to be able to respond. So capacity challenges, finance challenges. We've also heard about diagnostic challenges. How do we better understand how to position these countries so that they are really able to prevent the impact of oncoming disasters? And with the new technologies that are available, how do we kind of leapfrog and make those more readily available, viable, affordable, and able to be taken up by people who really need them, like the fishermen that we heard about from Dominican Republic. We know that electric engines are available, but do we have the means for people to be able to take up those opportunities? So what we have now is a chance to, in this next part of our session this morning, to hear from two of our fantastic experts who will tell us a little bit about some of the opportunities there are to increase resilience in small island and least developed countries. We have two people. One is Mr. Isaac Anthony, who's the CEO of the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, or CCRIF, which is the world's first multi-country risk pool, providing parametric insurance to Caribbean and Central American countries. He brings 25 years of senior management experience across many sectors, with a specific experience in the government of St. Lucia. He has a bachelor's degree in economics and accounting and an MBA as well. Fantastic level of experience that you're bringing to us today, Mr. Anthony, and we really appreciate that. Our second expert is Mr. Krishnan Divakaran Nair, who's the head of climate change with the Commonwealth Secretariat. Very, very big responsibility across all of those Commonwealth countries. He has a great background with the Global Green Growth Institute in India. He served on the UNFCCC Secretariat and has a really rich experience in climate finance himself, especially for least developed countries. He's also worked with GIZ in India, has a background in agriculture and climate finance, and really rich academic as well as practical experience to bring to us today. So I'd love to pose this question firstly to Mr. Anthony, if you don't mind. If you could tell us a little bit about the innovative and cost-effective insurance products that CCRIF has developed so that you can bring financial solutions and resilience amongst the Caribbean island states. And tell us what other tools there are apart from insurance products that can help reduce the risk and mitigate risks for smaller and developing states. Over to you for just a few minutes, please, Mr. Anthony, to tell us some of the great products and innovations that you've come up with in CCRIF. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And let me take the opportunity to thank the organizers for inviting me to serve on this very important panel. And I mean, the question that you have asked me would obviously take much longer, but I recognize we do have a time constraint. But let me just say, though, that in order to respond to the question, I guess we need to ask, you know, what was the inspiration behind the establishment of CRIF, that is the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility? And it really goes back to one particular event, a hurricane event called Hurricane Ivan, which happened in the year 2004. I mean, the impact of that hurricane event was so severe, I mean, resulting in loss and damage of which run into the billions of dollars. And in two of our member countries, you know, it accounted for over 200% of gross domestic product. It really made the Caribbean countries, and particularly the heads of government, realize how vulnerable those countries in the Caribbean are, particularly when it comes to, you know, just having to meet the financial requirements just to recover from these kinds of disasters. And the other thing that one has to note is that the Caribbean has generally been known as a hotbed for natural disasters. So when the heads of government realized that obviously we had those increasing frequency of these very disastrous events, they approached the World Bank for some technical assistance to develop, and of course, with the support of the World Bank and the other donors, they were able to come up with a disaster risk financing mechanism called CRIF, which really became the world's first multi-country risk pool based on parametric insurance. And I should say that the membership of CRIF has actually grown. Initially, when it was established in the year 2007, there were 16 members, and we have actually grown to 23, and we're still trying to get Dominican Republic, by the way. So I'm hoping we will be successful. The 23, the additional countries really do account for an expansion that we made with Central America, or what we call the COSIFIN grouping of countries, which actually includes Central American plus Dominican Republic. But in establishing this disaster risk financing mechanism, I think it's really important for us to consider three key value propositions. One, of availability, and I say availability because, you know, we assume that insurance is widely available, while traditional indemnity insurance is, but the type of insurance that governments were interested in terms of a tool or an instrument that produces quick liquidity, that was clearly not readily available. So CRIF came in and helped solve that particular problem. The second one, and perhaps the most important value proposition, is speed. When countries are impacted by major events, major disasters, they do need the financial resources quickly to help them respond. They can't wait another 6 months or 9 months and so on, as would be the case with traditional indemnity insurance. Traditional indemnity insurance actually does require what we call a loss adjustment process, which is an assessment of the losses on the ground, which can actually take quite some time. And so it is for that reason that we then decided to use parametric insurance, because parametric insurance gives us the ability to determine almost immediately, based on a model loss approach, what the losses are. And therefore, once the losses are determined, you would then be able to determine what the claims are. So clearly that is one of the key, the fact that we're able to provide quick liquidity, and we have been able to do so consistently within 2 weeks, 14 days. The third and most important, and well, certainly another important value proposition is the cost effectiveness. You know, insurance is generally not cheap. I think most of us agree with that. So we then have to find out what is the most cost-effective way. And because we did a risk pooling arrangement, obviously because of economies of scale and risk pooling, we're able to reduce the cost. The other important thing that we have to recognize is that CRIF is really designed as what we call a captive insurance company. And what it is that we're able to provide products which really attract risk that are generally priced too high by the traditional markets. And we therefore provide what they call a bespoke insurance solution that enables us to provide unique and tailored insurance for member countries. The other thing is that as a risk pooling or as an insurance company, we're able to retain some of the risk, thereby having to place less risk on the international reinsurance market, which is actually our biggest cost element. Now, in terms of the specific products, we do have 5 products, but we started off with actually 2. We do offer a product called for earthquake, and some of you may recall that last year, Haiti, which is considered to be the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, was struck by an earthquake event in August of last year. And CRIF, because they are a member and they were covered for earthquake, they were able to get $40 million within 14 days. We also offer tropical cyclone, and probably the Caribbean is better known for tropical cyclone events. And again, some of you would recall 2019, we were visited by 2 superstorms called Irma and Maria, tropical cyclones Irma and Maria. And they were so devastating, they impacted about 6 of our member countries. And again, we were able to make payouts totaling $55 million to those countries. And perhaps the most frequent climate risk is actually excess rainfall. A lot of countries are actually impacted. And again, clearly demonstrating the increasing impact of climate change. We also offer a product for fisheries, one that benefits the farmers or the fisheries, or what you call the fisher folks directly, and one that potentially can be used to assist in ensuring the fisheries assets. Very interesting product, and it has certainly helped to manage some of the risk that associated with that particular sector. And we also offer a product for the electric utility sector, and perhaps this is the first time that we were really going into the private sector. But the reason for that is because electricity, as you know, is a public good. And without electricity, a country can't function, certainly not in the Caribbean and the greater part of the world. So again, we were happy to have provided a solution for transmission and distribution assets, because insurance for those assets are generally not readily available. And we are already in the process of developing additional products such as drought, agriculture, and also we're collaborating with the Inter-American Development Bank as well as the Caribbean Development Bank to develop a multi-peril parametric insurance for the water sector. And just moving along quickly to the second part of the question, regarding what tools means apart from insurance can CRIF use to help risk mitigation. CRIF is an insurance company. We are actually a development insurance company. And beyond risk transfer, we focused since 2010 in engaging in activities that support members to build their resilience through disaster risk mitigation and climate activities. So for example, we do have a well-developed technical assistance program, which adds a lot of value to our members through capacity building, where we do a lot of training, scholarships, just helping countries understand risk and risk management. We offer grants to regional organizations, non-government organizations, academic institutions, just to assist them in dealing with initiative that helps improve disaster risk management, in the various areas. And we also have in place a tool that we share with our members, development partners and stakeholders called WeMap, that is able to provide live data on the movement of, let's say, for example, a tropical cyclone or an ongoing rainfall event, and even provide an element of forecasting. I mean, there's quite a lot that we've been doing, as I said, on the technical assistance side to help countries strengthen or to mitigate the impact of natural disasters. And, as a development insurance company, I think we are very pleased. I mean, we are seeing the potential to do more. I mean, there's a lot of interest. One of the things that I should point out very quickly before I end is that we're even looking at the possibility now of looking beyond just insurance and looking at other financing tools. For example, maybe offering what you call a partial credit guarantee facility, just to assist countries in obtaining the required funding to help, as I said, prepare for the onslaught or the impact of those major disasters. I will stop at this point, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Anthony. Fantastic response, very comprehensive, and wow, what an amazing reduction in time getting your financial payouts after a disaster from 9 months down to 2 weeks is going to make all the difference. So thank you so much for sharing that. Can I just ask Mr. Unikrishnan if you could tell us a little bit about the support that you're providing to SIDS and LDCs? What have you learnt about the importance of accessing finance and building resilience through innovation and technology. Is there anything that you want to tell us about how technology can be a useful tool for SIDS in building infrastructure resilience? And unfortunately, you only have a few minutes to do it, but if we can pick your brains on what you see as the best technology available for SIDS and low-income countries, that would be amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, moderator. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank CDRI to provide, to give Commonwealth this platform to talk about the work that we are doing. Thank you for the question. It's very timely. So I'll give my response in two parts. One, to talk a bit about the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub, and also about one initiative that we are undertaking in the Pacific, especially around use of technology. So the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub was operationalized in late 2016 as Commonwealth Heads of Government 2015 mandate that we received. So the hub and spokes model that we follow under the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub basically support member countries by embedding national as well as regional climate finance advisors to support member countries as well as the region in multiple aspects, including development of the project proposals, climate policy development support, climate finance readiness, including accreditation support, human and institutional capacity building, and of course, knowledge management and learning. As you've heard from the director from the Kingdom of Tonga, in terms of the support that we provide, so we are progressing. So right now, we have supported around 16 Commonwealth member countries and have successfully supported in accessing around $50 million worth of projects for the member countries. A big majority is readiness projects, setting up the standards in the countries. And of course, we do have a very robust pipeline of more than $800 million worth of projects in the three regions in Africa, Caribbean, as well as the Pacific. So talking specifically about the work that we're doing in the Pacific, so this is an initiative called the Common Sensing, which is basically an innovative project based on partnership with Fiji, Solomon Islands, and Vanuatu, and consortium of international partners, including UNITAR, Catapult, the Met Office, the University of Portsmouth, and UNOSAT. So basically what we do here is to build capacities of member countries by the use of geospatial and climate information services, because we heard from many speakers earlier that access to climate finance is an important gap, and of course the capacities therein. So, when we talk to the funding lines like the Green Climate Fund, Adaptation Fund, etc., the time it takes a proposal to move from a concept to a full proposal and then to a completed proposal for implementation, it's too long because of the quality of proposal, because of the kind of clarity of justification being provided. So that's where we thought of providing technical assistance to countries in providing the correct justification and accessing finance, especially supported by our advisors in the country. And definitely with that process, we enhance the quality of proposals, and we have seen a drastic improvement in the quality. So for that purpose, in partnership with UNITAR, the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, we've set up a platform called Common Sensing, supported by the UK Space Agency, where we use the Earth observation data basically to build the climate data layers, actually, for the country to use in different contexts, from infrastructure projects like the electric vehicles infrastructure, to renewable energy, to more of coastal and forest conservation efforts. So currently the advisors are trying to use this platform and to increase the kind of Earth observation data available, so that that could be used by member countries to develop proposals of impact and scale. So we also give same level of significance in mainstreaming this effort in the processes in the government. So for example, in Fiji, we have provided the blueprint for a project development unit within the Ministry of Economy, basically to integrate the platform into the governmental system. So the work is currently under progress. And similarly, under capacity building, we are adopting a right shop approach, basically a process of learning by doing, where we enable the country government officials to work around proposals, use these kind of available data and Earth observation information, basically to develop proposals at scale that actually moves the projects into the different stages of approval. So that's basically where we are. And in terms of how we would like to move forward, the common sensing is a great experience in the Pacific, and we definitely got a lot of traction to replicate this model in other member countries as well. So obviously we are in the process of taking it to other regions within the Commonwealth and to learn between countries and the experiences. So the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub currently is in a phase of expanding this work in other member countries. So we are providing webinars and other extension services basically for countries to understand this model and also to adopt it to enhance the access to climate finance. So this is a very specific example that I would like to present here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. An amazing suite of really kind of well-formed initiatives to help build capacity and shift forward that financing that we know is available. We know that there's global funding for finance, but we know that countries like SIDS and LDCs have trouble accessing it. So anything that can be done to bring that forward from the years and years that it sometimes takes is very similar to the themes that we just heard about from CRIF. You know, the need for more rapid funding and more responsive financial systems is just so important. And thank you also for highlighting the importance of geospatial technology, and that there are ways to try to bring that information into the hands of those who make the decisions in SIDS and LDCs, because we know that information is power. There's a lot of information out there, but it's not always easy and accessible to people who need to make the decisions. So we are a little behind time, so I need to skip to our final session just before. If we have time for questions, we'll take those as well. But really, we just want to hear one last time from our panel of eminent speakers. And the rule is that you only have 1 minute each, which is, I know, not enough. But what hasn't been said so far in this session that you really need to highlight, that we haven't picked up well enough or strongly enough, or something you would like to reinforce from your presentation, basically so that you can give us, the audience here, that take-home message. What do we need to think about when we're thinking disaster resilient infrastructure and transformations of all of these complex systems in SIDS and LDCs? So I will pass first to Director Luisa. If I can give you the floor for just 1 minute, if you don't mind. Thank you. I'm having trouble hearing you, Luisa.
Well, I would just propose perhaps for future discussions in forum like this, perhaps a discussion on how are we, like for example, the Pacific, the SIDS and the LDCs and the experts, how are we going to transfer the skills and the knowledge from, it's more or less like relating to South cooperation, things relating to that kind of future discussion. Like for example, the good lessons learned from the Caribbean, how is that experience and expertise and knowledge can be transferred to the Pacific Ocean, and so is the other region. Thank you.
What a fantastic initiative and thought to leave us on. Thank you so much, Luisa. Alejandrina, could you go next?
Yes, of course, Tim. I can say that we are looking forward, as I already mentioned, to future collaboration opportunities with the coalition, and for us means a lot to take this opportunity and further to share experiences and know-how with another members, as Mrs. Luisa mentioned. As well, I would like to take this opportunity to present our first expression of interest in participating at the facility and keep talking further with Mr. Sorry that I have all these things open here. With the CEO of the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, with the National Council for Climate Change in the Air. It's already in touch while we were talking. So yeah, they communicate us, and we are really looking forward to be working together through resilience and climate change.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandrina. Perhaps Mr. Anthony can ensure all of your fishermen that are having their boats damaged in the port. It's wonderful to make these connections over these fora. So I'm glad that we're making them in real time. Lieutenant Colonel Fali, could I ask you to please just give us your final words from your perspective in the Indian Ocean? Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor once again. Of course, I think we should highlight that, as we already say, that this platform is a good opportunity for us to have and to benefit also from the experience of the other countries and then all those experts and stakeholders. Here in Madagascar, we try to develop a plan that mainstreams disaster risk management, disaster risk reduction and climate change, and starting from this, having infrastructure resilient to climate change. So your experience and maybe from all those stakeholders and the link that you might do from this platform will be very, very welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel. It's wonderful to have the perspective from Madagascar. It's not always the case here in the Pacific that we get to hear from the Indian Ocean. So thank you for that. And if I could just go to our other two experts as well, Mr. Anthony, any final messages from you?
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Well, first of all, just to reiterate, and I think that's something that we all are aware of already, but disasters, unfortunately, are here to stay. While we can take actions to mitigate the impact, the reality is that we can't get rid of them completely. So we must put the financing arrangements in place. And while I have spoken a lot about CRIF in terms of what we do, in terms of providing an insurance solution, as we know, the disaster risk financing framework is a lot broader than just insurance, right? And there are other tools that we can use. And so it's really important for countries to pay attention to disaster risk financing and what are the different tools that one can employ. And the reality is that many of the tools are actually are complementary. They're not necessarily substitutes. When a country is impacted by a major hazard, whether it be tropical cyclone or earthquake and so on, no insurance will be able to give you enough money to meet all of the cost. So it has to be done in collaboration with other types of tools. And so we'll be very happy to have that conversation with our colleagues. Certainly in the Pacific, we already have some kind of discussion going on. There's actually a similar facility in the South Pacific for some of those islands. And we are very much in touch with them, and we certainly look forward to working with them. But I think there's room to improve the collaboration. And certainly, Alejandrina, I hope I got your name correctly. I would certainly take you up on that offer. I think, we've really been trying and working along with other persons with the World Bank, but we've not been successful. But I think, given what you've said, we may just be able to overcome the hurdles. So I look forward to talking to you and your colleagues with a view to bringing Dominican Republic on board. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Anthony. I mean, one thing that I was just really struck by your presentation was the market mechanism that's involved in you as an insurance organization, also investing in the prevention side so that hopefully your payouts are a bit less. And I think this is a remarkable kind of combination that we really do need in other parts of the world. And I would agree with Ms. Louisa that we don't have enough of that in the Pacific as yet. Even though there are so many disasters, the access to insurance and the amount of finance that's available for those adaptation measures and disaster prevention is simply not sufficient at the moment. So thank you for sharing that Caribbean experience, which is very, very, very relevant down here, and I'm sure in the Indian Ocean as well. And our last speaker, Mr. Unikrishnan, if you would mind just giving us your last take-home messages as well, we'll be very grateful from the Commonwealth Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I see the climate finance landscape, if I can call it. It's a very dynamic space, actually. So member countries are also transforming in its development, and also when we study the NDCs submitted by the member countries, the requirements are going up. So obviously, there need to be a lot of dynamism in the financial instruments that we use to support climate finance. So we've been, by and large, grant-driven initiatives, but of course we'll have to move into more blended financing and of course to other financial instruments, including the first loss guarantee facilities and others. So obviously when we move to this space, definitely the policies that countries have developed, like as Louisa pointed out, in terms of the Tonga Trust Fund and the Tonga preparedness to deal with climate finance at scale, we need enabling policies. Also, we need institutional capacities and human capacities within the institutions, basically to deal with this. Otherwise, we will not be able to coherently move in this space. So my last word is that we need very coordinated actions, good partnerships, and of course, moving forward with a very clear agenda that accessing finance is one of the major bottlenecks. And of course, there need to be a coordinated effort to successfully, because we have seen that many countries have successfully accessed finance, but when it comes to implementation of those projects, we see those institutional bottlenecks taking it forward. So I think we need to be aware of those deficiencies and then plan in the beginning so that we can effectively use the finances. And with the support of our member countries, the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub is committed to do this mandated work, and we are continuing our efforts in this space. Thank you.
Perfect. A great note to leave us on. Thank you so much. So, I mean, a really rich range of presentations from on the ground and from some of our global experts as well about how we can make the transitions that are needed. to make small island developing states as well as low-income countries more resilient to the complex disasters they're facing. We heard about how complex those disasters are, how they have no regard for particular sectors like energy, like transport, like tourism. The disaster doesn't care. It can wipe out all of those. And so we need to be ready for a multi-sector response. And that means we need greater capacity in these countries, and we need better ways of sharing experience, as Ms. Louisa told us, across SIDS and LDCs themselves. So we don't have all of the capacity captured in the wealthier countries that have already dealt with a lot of these challenges, but we can share lessons across people on this forum and others in SIDS and LDCs. We heard about the vulnerability of coastal and low-lying areas, and it's just a good reinforcement again to just hear how threatened communities living in those coastal areas are. We heard about the simultaneous need to reduce emissions while adapting to climate impacts. For example, in the Ports Authority, that's two extremely complicated challenges before you at the same time. We heard the need for better data that can easily be used by governments and communities in SIDS and LDCs. And we also heard quite a lot about the needs for transitions in finance systems, so they're more responsive, so they can get finances out quickly after a disaster. And this is not just the private finance, but also the global climate funds that need to be more responsive and accessible. So we've got insurance, we've got global climate funds, we've got other products, and they should, as Mr. Isaac told us, they should finance prevention as well as response. So that's just a few of the themes we heard about today. There was much more richness in the presentations that I can't quite do justice, but I do thank you all for joining us in the audience, but also especially to our presenters who came from all around the world to share their knowledge for this international CDRI forum. And in closing, I'd like to mention that I worked closely with CDRI in helping establish the Infrastructure for Resilient Island States Initiative, or IRIS, which was launched at COP26 in Glasgow last year by my Prime Minister from Australia, along with the Prime Ministers of India, UK, Jamaica, Mauritius, and Fiji, as a response from SIDS to have a more comprehensive level of global support in making their infrastructure more disaster and climate resilient. So with that note, I'll just hand back to our MC, who I think will share with us a little more on the IRIS initiative. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating in this forum today. Over to you, MC.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's a delight to have you moderate this session, and we are grateful for your continuing support to the work we are doing at CDRI with IRIS. As you mentioned, we launched IRIS at the World Leaders Summit in Glasgow. And the discussion that led to the creation of IRIS actually started last year at ICDRI 2021. So we would like to close this session with the video of IRIS. And I can also let you know that we have convened in Studio 2 with our next session.
Small island developing states, or SIDS, are home to unique landscapes, vibrant cultures and traditions. However, SIDS also face the highest disaster losses in proportion to their GDP. They face large economic, social and environmental challenges compounded by climate change threatening their very existence. Resilient infrastructure is a key driver in mitigating disaster and climate risks while also meeting the development aspirations of SIDS. SIDS are already taking actions to implement the Samoa pathway. But this cannot be done alone. There is a need for broader partnerships for resilient island nations. The Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure is a global partnership that aims to build climate and disaster resilience into infrastructure systems to ensure sustainable development.
I would like to say that CDRI has set a challenging and urgent agenda for itself.
The Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. The UK is proud to be its co-chair.
We are all at the front lines of climate-driven disasters, and we all stand our best chance at building resilient infrastructure by working together.
CDRI's Infrastructure for Resilient Island States, IRIS, will promote resilient, sustainable and inclusive infrastructure in SIDS. IRIS has been co-curated by the SIDS and CDRI partners. It will work in synergy with other ongoing efforts in SIDS. Aligned with the Samoa pathway, IRIS will focus on delivering 3 key outcomes: improving disaster and climate resilience of infrastructure, strengthening knowledge and partnerships for resilient infrastructure, promoting gender equality and disability inclusion through resilient infrastructure. Let us together be a part of a growing community committed to building more resilient and prosperous island nations.